Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing The Dispatcher by John Scalzi. This is what the cover of the book looks like. This is a short book by the author John Scalzi, the author of Old Man's War. I believe that is what he is best known for. It's a very short book. It's under 150 pages, but I had a blast reading this. So I'm going to give you an outline of the plot as well as my thoughts about this book and people who will enjoy this book and people who maybe I think might not enjoy this book as much. So stay tuned. Let's dive in to what happens in The Dispatcher, and I will tell you my thoughts about it at the end. So this is my first John Scalzi book in a while, and I find that Scalzi is one of those authors that I read and I love, and then I forget he exists for 2 years, and I don't know why I keep doing this. So I have read several of his books in the past. I've read Old Man's War, and I have read his Locked In series, as well as a few other ones, I think. But I have not read The Dispatcher, so this is the first book that I have read by him in a while. So in The Dispatcher, the world is just like ours with one very crucial twist, and that is it is not possible anymore to kill someone directly. So when you are killed, you wake up in your bed naked and you just keep living. And this has created a lot of changes in society, as we might think. It seems like a big change, and the mechanism behind this change isn't quite sure, or it isn't quite known. So people are just living with this idea that you cannot just shoot somebody and then that's the end of it. That person comes back. Now, as we can imagine, the first thing that gets involved is insurance. Who loves insurance? I dislike dealing with insurance of any kind. So we meet Tony Valdez, who is going to be the star of the show. He is what is called a dispatcher. So insurance has gotten involved. Why pay for expensive medical procedures when a medical procedure goes wrong and the patient dies or is about to die? You can intentionally kill the person and they will wake up at home, and they wake up at home in a state of body that is similar to like 12 or 30 hours before they were killed. So the medical procedure hasn't happened and you can reattempt the medical procedure. Insurance companies are of course thinking that this is going to be a great way to do who knows what. It's insurance companies. And Tony Valdez works as a dispatcher, so he accompanies patients into different rooms and like medical procedure rooms, and when things go south, he has a very clinical sterile way of dispatching them, for lack of a better term, and they will wake up at home and they will get to retry life again. So this is something that he is working on, and he does this, and as you can imagine, people have different feelings about dispatchers, but this is a reality of life we live in, and insurance companies are apparently insisting on this. So he is doing his job in the hospital when we meet him, when he receives word from a detective who comes to visit him that his friend, who is also a dispatcher, who goes by the name of Jimmy Albert, has gone missing. Now remember, you can't just up and get rid of people as easily these days. So when someone goes missing, it's usually that they're kidnapped, because if he wasn't kidnapped, he would appear at home in his bed if he had just been, thrown off a pier or something. So Detective Langdon approaches Tony Valdez because Tony is his friend, and she thinks that maybe he can help with the investigation. And as you probably already guessed, with changes like this in the world, there is a seedier side of this. There are people who maybe want to have a dispatcher for their own private means or their own personal ends, or people who are doing procedures or medical treatments at home who want a personal dispatcher on hand. So there's a seedier side, there are less than legal sides, there are private gigs that you can get. There's a whole underworld that has developed under this. Tony Valdez believes that Jimmy has taken a private gig that has gone south, and he shares this information with Detective Langdon, and they're working to recover their friend while also trying to unravel this world that is the underworld of this legal dispatching profession that has grown up thanks to different changes in the world. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because again, it's like 130 pages and I really don't want to get too far into the plot and spoil too many plot points for you. Now, my thoughts on this book overall. I find that I really like the scenarios that John Scalzi thinks up and puts his characters in. I do really enjoy it. I definitely understood that in a book this small, you aren't going to be able to develop everything to its fullest as you will in like a 300, 400 page novel. So I was expecting that. And as much as I like this scenario, I think if you're the kind of person who needs hard details on how this mechanism works, how people aren't winding up dead, what's causing this to happen, what are the loopholes? Some loopholes are discussed, but if you need all the hard details to really fall into a system, especially of fantasy, sci-fi, I'm not sure what you would call this, system, you're probably not going to like this book, because the author kind of just sets up the scenario and then moves the plot along, because mostly it's about this kidnapping plot with an interesting twist. So If you like the hard details, I think this is the kind of book that you're not going to enjoy. Due to the size, the length of this book, excuse me, and the fast and loose framework we're working with, I didn't really mind not having all the details. I was okay with the author just setting up the premise and then us going into the premise and assuming that this is how the world works without needing to have that mechanism explained to me. So I was okay with not having the details, but I definitely understand people who may read this book, who may want all the details on how this mechanism works, being very unhappy or upset that they don't get all those details, and they're expected to take this change in the world at face value. So I think there is a group of people who will not enjoy a book like this. Definitely not being able to murder anyone raises a lot of interesting things in the world, and I feel like many scenarios could be extrapolated out of this condition that has been placed on the world. So I think it does raise interesting stakes, especially because we can safely assume that Jimmy Albert is not deceased, and that lends itself to not just being, well, like, so-and-so's missing, of course we're going to find them dead somewhere in a warehouse or something. We know that's not the case because Jimmy Albert would be around. So it does change the stakes a little bit. It's very fast-paced, as you can imagine, from being 130 pages, things kind of move. And also, there isn't a whole lot of twist. You kind of understand the flow of the story, but I think the concept is what really kept it interesting. The concept, so you have a kidnapping case, but with this little twist of a concept that gets set up, and for me, it was very, very enjoyable, and it reminds me why I like reading John Scalzi. If you enjoyed this book, if you think the premise sounds interesting, feel free to check it out. If you've read this book and have thoughts and comments on it, please leave it in the comment section down below. I love to receive your comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.